This is Autism and the Structure of Reality, Part 16, The Parable of the Weeds, Humility, and the Limits of Human Vision. In the last episode, we followed a simple image that became far more profound than it first appeared. A seed, something so small, something that tells you almost nothing about what it will eventually become. And yet Jesus chose that image to describe both the kingdom of God and the human person. We asked, what happens when ideas, values, loves, and ways of seeing reality are planting within us? How they become habits, how habits become character, how character becomes the person. And perhaps the central question we carried with us was this: what are we becoming? Because every thought, every repeated action, every voice we trust, every person we imitate, every object of our attention is participating in that process. But the parable of the weeds refuses to let us stop there, because eventually, every seed grows towards a destination. Eventually, the tree becomes visible. Eventually, fruit appears. Eventually, there is a harvest. And that raises another question, not simply, what am I becoming? But where does that becoming ultimately lead? I think this is why one of the most important questions we can ask of any culture, institution, movement, family, school, church, or system is not merely, what does it say it believes, but what does it grow? What kind of human beings emerge from it? What does it reward and punish? What does it teach people to admire? What does it train them to fear and avoid? Where does it direct attention? What does it make easier to become? Because every system has an idea of the good human being hidden somewhere inside it. Every system rewards certain ways of being. And over time, those rewards shape behavior. Behavior becomes repetition. Repetition becomes character. Character becomes the person. And once again, we arrive at the question that has followed us since Kierkegaard. What are we becoming? But I think the parable of the weeds forces us to ask one more question. Not only, what are we becoming? Not only, what is the crowd becoming? And not only, what kinds of people are our systems cultivating? But the question is, what happens when the thing we are becoming looks successful? What happens when the weed is beautiful and it receives applause, admiration? What happens when millions of people imitate it? What happens when it produces wealth, power, attention, status, or influence? Do we assume that because something grows, it must be good? Do we assume that because something wins, it must be true and deserving? Do we assume that because a crowd follows, the path must be right? The third temptation should make us extraordinarily cautious about that. Because Satan did not offer Jesus failure. He offered him the kingdoms. If you are so righteous and good, just take control. Make the people follow you. He offered splendor. He offered the visible signs of victory. And Jesus said no. Which means success alone cannot tell us what kind of seed produced it. Growth alone cannot tell us whether something is good. Popularity certainly cannot tell us whether something is true. And the crowd cannot tell us who we should become. So perhaps the question is not merely whether something is growing. Everything is growing and changing. The question is towards what? And perhaps even more importantly, into what? And perhaps this is where the parable of the weeds becomes most difficult. Because everything grows toward something. A seed does not simply grow. It grows into something. And if human beings are continually becoming, The becoming is not merely a movement. It has a direction. We can become more courageous, more cowardly, more truthful, or more deceptive, more capable of love, or more consumed by resentment, more willing to see reality as it is, or more skilled at protecting ourselves from anything that threatens the reality we have constructed. We are fantastic at that as human beings. And I don't think these changes usually happen all at once. They grow slowly and quietly, often beneath the surface, until eventually something that was nearly invisible becomes a way of being in the world. And perhaps that is why Jesus speaks so often about fruit, because fruit reveals something, not everything. We should be careful there, but something. It reveals what has been growing. And this brings us to the part of the parable of the weeds that I don't think we can avoid: the harvest. Jesus explains that the harvest is the end of age. The reapers are angels. The wheat and the weeds do not simply grow forever. There is a destination. There is a reckoning and a judgment. And whatever else we may want to say about this parable, I don't think we should soften that. Jesus doesn't, but something about his explanation is incredibly important. The servants are not the ones who ultimately perform the separation. God is. The people standing inside the field are not given God's view of the world. And I think that distinction matters enormously because the servants can see something real. They are correct, the weeds exist. They are correct that something harmful has been planted. They are correct that the enemy has done this. Their mistake is not that they see nothing. Their limitation is that they do not see enough. They can identify a problem without understanding every consequence of their proposed solution. And I think human history is filled with examples of that exact mistake. We see something wrong. We identify the problem. We are fantastic at it. We decide who caused it. And then we conceive ourselves that if we can only remove the right people, the right ideas, the right group, the right institutions, the world will finally become good. But the field is complicated. Human beings are vastly complicated. History is complicated. Actions produce consequences we did not intend. Solutions create new problems. The thing we destroy may have been connected to something we were trying to save. And perhaps one of the hardest truths for an intelligent human being to accept is this: you can correctly identify a problem and still be wrong about what should be done next. Think about it. I think that is exactly where humility becomes indispensable, right here. The more I've reflected on these episodes, the more I've become convinced that humility isn't simply one Christian virtue among many. It may be the doorway through which every other transformation must pass. Earlier in the series, when we explored the Beatitudes, we talked about this. I argued that when Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven," he isn't primarily describing weakness. He's describing humility. A person who recognizes that they do not already possess everything they need. It's willingness, it's openness, it's awareness, self-awareness. Someone who can still learn, who can still be corrected, who can still receive. And I continue to find it remarkable that the very first beatitude is different from the rest, except for the last. We've talked about this. I hope people see this. There's 2 present tense beatitudes, and the rest of them are future tense. The beginning and ending, you get the kingdom now. Jesus doesn't say there's will be the kingdom of heaven. He says there's is the kingdom of heaven. Present tense. That has always fascinated me. I don't know if people understand this enough. I don't have enough conversations about this. I don't have enough access to talk about this. Every beatitude after that, except for the last one, points toward something that shall be. They shall be comforted. They shall inherit the earth. They shall receive mercy. They shall see God. But the kingdom already belongs to the poor in spirit. Why? I wonder if it is because humility is already the posture that makes reception possible. The kingdom cannot be forced upon someone who already believes they possess everything they need. It is received. Perhaps that is why Jesus begins there. Because if I already know, if I already see the whole field, if I'm already convinced that my perspective is complete, then there is very little left for me to receive. Maybe that's what we were really talking about with the parable of the sower. Not simply different kinds of soil, different postures towards reality. A heart that remains open, a person who can still change, a person who can still become. Because if I cannot receive, I cannot change. If I cannot change, I cannot become. Kierkegaard once wrote that we are already a self, and we are continually becoming a self. It's popular on this episode. It's popular in this series. But becoming assumes something. It assumes that I am not finished. Perhaps that's another way of describing humility. Not pretending to know nothing. Not denying what we genuinely know, but refusing to believe that our becoming has ended. That there is still more truth than I possess. Still more goodness than I embody. Still more reality than I perceive. Still more of me that God intends to transform. Maybe the opposite of being poor in spirit isn't simply pride. Maybe it's believing, I've arrived. I already know. I already see. I'm finished. If that's true, then perhaps the kingdom has nowhere left to enter. Humility is not merely a virtue among many. It is the posture that keeps becoming possible. I recently heard an idea about humility that I've continued thinking about. Humility is not the absence of a high aim. It is not thinking poorly of yourself. It is not refusing to act. And it certainly isn't pretending that good and evil does not exist. Instead, I wonder if humility has something to do with keeping our highest aim properly connected to the actions actually available to us. It's all about the present tense. We aim upward, toward what is true, toward what is good, toward God. But then we ask, what is actually mine to do? Today, here, with the person in front of me, with the responsibilities I actually have, with the choices that are actually available. And I think there is something profoundly important about that. Because without a high aim, we wander. But without humility, we may begin to believe that because we cannot see the highest good, we also possess the knowledge and authority to control the entire field. But we don't. Our bias is almost that. We love that as human beings. Perhaps humility allows us to aim toward heaven without pretending that we possess God's view. And maybe that is one reason humility keeps our attention properly ordered. It returns us to what is actually in front of us. Remember, we talked about the Lord's Prayer. It's a hierarchy. It's orientation. It's attention up towards God through Logos with Satan behind us. Not because the rest of the world doesn't matter. Not because injustice doesn't matter. Not because evil should be ignored, but because human beings have a remarkable tendency to become consumed with fixing everyone and everything except the person over whom we have the most immediate responsibility, ourselves. Matthew chapter 7 is brilliant. It's my second favorite chapter. We can become experts in what everyone else should do, what the government should do, what the church should do, what schools should do, what our family should do, what the other political party should do, what an entire generation should do. And sometimes, while looking across the field, we stop noticing what is growing beneath our own feet or within us. This takes me back to the Lord's Prayer. Your kingdom come, your will be done. That is an extraordinarily high aim, perhaps the highest possible aim. But then Jesus teaches us to pray. Give us this day our daily bread. This day. Not every day that will ever exist. Not every problem in the world. But this day, the kingdom and daily bread, the highest aim. And the reality immediately before us. And perhaps humility is somehow found in holding those two together. The highest aim tells us where to look. Humility tells us where to step. One does not eliminate the other. The person who only looks down may forget where they are going. The person who only looks toward the horizon may fall over what is directly in front of them. But we need both. That's direction. And the next step. And I think this returns us to the servants in the field. They see the weeds. They want to act. That impulse is understandable, perhaps even admirable in some sense. They care about the field. They care about what is growing. But the master sees something they do not. Pulling the weeds now may uproot the wheat with them. And so the master says, wait. Let them grow together until the harvest. I imagine that's not the answer the servants wanted. It isn't the answer I would want, because waiting can feel like passivity. Patience can look like indifference and weakness. And when something evil is happening, not now, can be one of the most difficult answers to accept. And perhaps patience and indifference are not the same thing. The master is not indifferent. The harvest will come. That distinction between wheat and weeds ultimately matters. Good and evil are not collapsed into one another. There is judgment. But the timing does not belong to the servants. They don't have the white horse, but the name, the word. Neither does the final judgment, though. And I think that distinction should make every human being deeply humble. But there's another question I keep returning to. Why allow them to grow together at all? Why would God permit a world in which wheat and weeds occupy the same field? Why not create a world in which the good is immediately protected from everything evil? This is the brothers Karamazov with Alyosha and Ivan. I don't think the parable of the weeds gives us a complete answer to the entire problem of evil. I would be suspicious of anyone who claimed it did. But Jesus does reveal something important. The removal of evil is not as simple as human beings imagine it to be. The field is interconnected. Lives are interconnected. History is interconnected. And the immediate destruction of one thing may destroy something else along with it. That doesn't answer every question. It doesn't explain every tragedy. It doesn't remove the anguish of suffering, but it does challenge one of the most persistent assumptions, that if we were in control, we would know exactly what to remove. But would we? Human history should make us very cautious about that answer. There is something strangely comforting about believing that if we simply had enough power, enough knowledge, enough authority, we could finally remove every weed from the field. History has shown us otherwise again and again. Human beings have attempted to build perfect societies, perfect governments, ideologies, perfect revolutions, and perfect churches, perfect cultures. and almost every one of them eventually discovered the same painful truth. The field is more complicated than imagined. Human beings are more complicated than imagined. Perhaps that is why Jesus tells the servants to wait. Not because evil doesn't matter, it does. Not because truth doesn't matter, it does. Not because justice will never come, it will. But because the servants are not the master. They see part of the field, the master sees the whole. And perhaps humility begins with recognizing that difference. Maybe that is one of the greatest lessons hidden within this parable. The question is not whether we should care about truth. The question is whether we can care deeply without pretending that we possess God's perspective. Perhaps wisdom begins there, not in seeing nothing, but in recognizing that seeing something is not the same thing as seeing everything. Remember this idea. Humility is not merely a virtue among many. It is the posture that keeps us becoming. If you're listening to the episode, listening to the podcast, please leave a review or rating. In podcasting, reviews, ratings, and downloads are huge, and I very much appreciate your feedback. You can contact me on X at RPS47586. You can email me, info.fromthespectrum@gmail.com. You can check out the YouTube page for full-length videos, shorts, and clips. You can subscribe. I don't necessarily care, but I want you to understand the material. It's good material, and it's there. It's open for discussion. It's open for dialogue. Thank you for listening to From the Spectrum podcast. If you're raising a child with autism, you've probably experienced the confusion that comes with trying to make sense of it all. One expert says one thing, another says the opposite. And social media is full of opinions. Every week there's a new therapy, a new program, a new approach claiming to be the answer. And somewhere in the middle of all this noise, you're trying to figure out what's actually best for your child. That's why I recommend Lynn R. Curry and Elevate How You Navigate. Lynn is the father of an autistic son, host of the Autism Parenting Secrets podcast, and someone who understands firsthand how overwhelming the autism journey can be. His focus isn't on adding more noise. It's on helping parents gain clarity, confidence, and a practical path forward. Through his coaching and guidance, Lynn helps parents cut through the noise, sort through conflicting advice, and make decisions with greater confidence. The goal isn't to tell you what to think. It's to help you navigate your family's unique situation with greater certainty and purpose. Lynn offers a free strategic clarity call where you can discuss your family's challenges, explore opportunities for growth, and identify meaningful next steps. To learn more or schedule your free call, visit elevatehowyounavigate.com. Because when parents have clarity, they can navigate with confidence, and that can make all the difference in the world. First, I would like to mention MAYU water. If you're trying to upgrade your hydration, MAYU uses a vortex flow system that mimics how water naturally moves in rivers and streams. That motion helps increase oxygenation and release unwanted gases like chlorine, improving overall water quality and making it easier to stay consistently hydrated. But here's what most people overlook. Hydration isn't just about water. It's about minerals and absorption. MAYU allows you to remineralize your water with essential minerals and electrolytes, supporting cellular hydration, energy levels, and overall physiological balance. When your water has the right structure and mineral content, your body can actually use it more efficiently. If you care about hydration, performance, or just feeling better day to day, this is one of those simple upgrades that adds up. You can get 10% off with the code AUTISM. Next, Daylight Computer Company and Daylight Kids. These devices are designed to work with your brain, not against it. And honestly, the future of tech is already here. Most screens are built for stimulation, bright, fast, and attention-grabbing. But that often leads to eye strain, mental fatigue, and disrupted sleep. Daylight takes a different approach. By reducing blue light and lowering your overall sensory load, these devices support sustained focus, calmer attention, and healthier sleep patterns. For anyone who feels drained after screen time, or for kids whose nervous systems are still developing, this creates a much more natural, regulated way to engage with technology. If you want your tech to support your brain instead of overstimulating it, this is worth checking out. Use code AUTISM for $50 off. And finally, Chroma light devices, lights designed for humans. Natural light contains a full spectrum that our brains and bodies are tuned to. But most modern indoor lighting falls short of that. It's often narrow, harsh, and out of sync with how we're designed to experience light. Chroma is built to bring that balance back. These lights are designed to better reflect the qualities of natural light, supporting your circadian rhythm, reducing sensory strain, and creating environments that feel calmer and more aligned. That can translate into better sleep, more stable energy, and a nervous system that isn't constantly being pushed toward overload. If you have ever felt off under certain lighting and didn't know why, this is worth exploring. Get 10% off with the code AUTISM. If you're optimizing your environment, your focus, your well-being, your nervous system, these products are worth checking out.